Please welcome the Environment Program Lead for Bloomberg Philanthropies, Antha Williams.
Hi there, good afternoon, thank you. We are on a tight clock, a lot to talk about, so I'm going to dive right in. As you all know, mobility is changing at lightning speed, and mayors and civic leaders are continuing to expand mass transit, but also making sure that mobility systems are zero carbon and complementing those efforts through investing in things like bike infrastructure and walkability. It's an important and urgent problem, I don't need to tell you. Transport accounts for about 20% of global carbon emissions. And traffic is the biggest source of outdoor air pollution, one of the leading sources globally responsible for about a quarter of particulate matter in the air. So cities are becoming more congested, and a recent study actually showed that across the US, Germany, France, and the UK, congestion was responsible for a loss of about 1% of average GDP. So that's why we've come together today to discuss with leaders of cities, of business and labor leaders what actions they're taking to transition to green and healthy streets. This session is going to celebrate that transition, and I want to highlight today on the stage that we'll have 3 mayors who are newly signed on to the C40 Fossil Fuel Streets Declaration. So these mayors have committed to, number 1, procuring only zero emissions buses from 2025, and 2, to ensure a major area of their city is zero emissions by 2030. Yes, round of applause for that. So I'm going to go ahead and one last thing I'll say just to frame the importance of this to human health, which I know is a priority certainly for Bloomberg Philanthropies, but also for all of you in the room, that the actions in the declaration have the potential to collectively avoid 11,000 premature deaths from air pollution emissions. So really significant in terms of obviously climate change, but also public health. So I'd like to now welcome to the stage our 3 mayors who've committed to the Fossil Fuel Streets Declaration. First, Mayor Aboutaleb from Rotterdam. Come on to the stage, thank you so much. Second, the Mayor of Warsaw, Gronkowicz-Waltz. And finally, Mayor Gutierrez from Medellin. Please join us on the stage.
I was taking this.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so time is tight. We're going to dive right in. Thank you all for joining us and for your commitment on these issues. Starting with you, Mayor Aboutaleb, I'd just like to ask each of you to say a word about why it was important for your city to sign on to the Fossil Fuel Free Declaration and what you plan to do to implement it.
Well, I think it's really important to sign up. The city of Rotterdam has one of the largest ports in the world, good for about 500 million tons of goods. 80% of it is re-exported for markets like Germany, for instance. All iron ore and all the other stuff that is needed for the German industry is transshipped in the port of Rotterdam. So you may imagine 10,000 of movements every year of barges and trucks going to Germany and to the other places. So we produce nowadays 17% of the pollution in the Netherlands. 17. That is the result of the heavy industry that we have. 2,000 petrochemical sites in the port. After Houston, one of the largest in the world. So it's not a matter whether we have a choice. We don't have a choice. We have to do so. And secondly, a lot of cities and countries are moving in the right direction. In my eyes, I see a lot of practices in the world. But in safeguarding the way we live now, our economy is based on carbon. Safeguarding that because we're afraid to lose jobs is what Napoleon said in the past, that is losing the form of war. Mm-hmm. By signing with the city of Rotterdam and the Netherlands, we would like to embrace the future. Mm-hmm. We believe really that going through that system of investments in the climate issues and reducing pollution equals the new economy, and that equals the new jobs. So if you don't follow that path, finally you will lose the game, and you will lose your position also as a port. So greening the port together with other ports in the world, organizing transportation differently, but also increasing density in the city. We have overcapacity in the public transport system. So public transport, in my opinion, is not only buying the right buses, it's dealing with spatial planning. If you want to increase density in the city where families come to live, these families will have kids to go to school, and the schools are not always downtown. So to reduce the number of unwanted kilometers, you have to construct these apartments differently than we did in the past. For example, you give an opportunity to a developer to build a building of 50 floors, and nowadays we say the first floor is maybe a supermarket. The future will be, and that is my aim for the coming years, the solution will be the first floor, second floor, third floor, and fifth floor will be an education center, a school, for instance. To avoid that mothers will take in 7 o'clock in the morning the car to get to the outskirts, bring the kids, and then at 3 o'clock drive the same kilometers again. So it's spatial planning. It's really another way of thinking about where to live, where to work, where to recreate. Thirdly, we take some 6,000 of parking lots out of the public space. 6,000 parking lots, just to make it easy for people to access downtown. So the city downtown is a kind of a city lounge where it is nice to go for a restaurant, to walk, and to cycle. We have a tremendous amount of bikes nowadays. It's a big success that are now facing deficits when it comes to where we put these bicycles, when all these people are coming with bicycles to downtown. So doing reconstructions of main streets means that we, under the ground, we may find solutions to park all these bicycles. I was listening yesterday to my colleague from Copenhagen telling that in his capital, they have 300 kilometers of bicycle lanes just in the city. Well, we have 600. That is Rotterdam, Paris, Lyon, somewhere halfway. That is a tremendous amount of bicycle lanes, and we have also bicycle lanes that connect cities. And I'm happy to see that the e-bike sales are fantastically growing even in my city. So public transport and logistics, well, that's what I want to say, and we'll end by that, is not a matter of buying an e-bus. Mm-hmm. It's a concept of spatial planning, it's organizing, it's rethinking the way you produce, and it's also rethinking the way you access the neighborhoods where citizens are living and organize smooth connections.
I love that. I love the comprehensiveness of the approach, and the city lounge idea is a great one. Mayor Grunkovitz-Waltz, I want to turn to you to answer the same question. Why sign on to this declaration? Why is it significant for you, and what do you plan to do to implement it?
I think that we are signing as the city of Warsaw because it's an incentive, and of course when you put the goal in front of you, you try to achieve. So because it's not only to sign the declaration, but to execute and to act in this direction. And I should say that my city survived, I would say, a huge change in transportation, in public transportation, because we not only exchange and change our road stock, we have almost 200 kilometers of rail for trams, because we never liquidated the trams. It's happened to the other cities. We have, of course, fast train, and we are constructing subway. And we have bikes as well. I should say that we built 500 kilometers of biking roads for cyclists. And it became very popular because we have at the moment about 400 bikes, which are city bikes. I don't count, of course, private bikes. and it became very popular. And it's very interesting that we have also special place roads for bicycles, not only in Warsaw, but together with the other committees, which is municipalities which are around Warsaw. And it was financed like many other our investment, but this was especially financed from the fund which is called ITI, which is a new operational fund from the EU. It's territorial investment. So for 39 municipalities which are our neighbors. So I think from this point of view, it's really a huge revolution. We have also electric bikes, 100 bikes are electric. We have city bikes. We have also car sharing, and this is a private investment, 200 cars, electric cars. And also we are buying electric buses now. Already 20 is going in the center of the city, where there are tourists and also citizens as well. And we are on the way to buy 160. So it's a huge revolution.
That's great. And I take both of your comments that there's not a silver bullet. It's not only about procuring electric vehicles, but there is something satisfying about being able to measure that increase in the electric buses that you're putting on the road. So that's terrific. Thank you.
Yes, and I would like also to add that in our case, 60% of population uses public transportation. And we introduced last year for the students, primary school, secondary school, not yet high school, for free. So you don't pay. Just to make a culture that you use the public transportation.
That's great.
We do that for the elderly, it's 65 plus. It's free to use public transport.
Using public transport.
Whatever your income is, we don't distinguish.
That's great. That's great. Mayor Gutierrez, I'm going to turn to you and ask the same question. Why sign on to the declaration, and what will you do in Medellín to implement it?
Bueno, él me va a ayudar a hacer la traducción en inglés. Lo primero es porque nosotros estamos convencidos que para que se puedan dar los cambios globales se tienen que dar los cambios desde lo local. Y somos justamente las ciudades las llamadas a generar este cambio.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm actually going to have him interpret for me into English. The first thing is we are convinced that global change is going to start first at the local level, and that is, of course, our cities.
En América Latina, justamente, pues, la región a la que yo represento en el comité directivo de C40, estamos hablando que el 80% de la población hoy vive en los núcleos urbanos. En el 2030 será el 85% y hay que tomar decisiones justamente porque la población va a seguir creciendo y de no hacerlo la problemática va a ser mayor.
And now talking about Latin America specifically, and more specifically the committee that I'm a part of, 80% of people in Colombia right now live in cities. And in the future, that number will grow to 85%. So we need to make fast, smart decisions now to deal with this growth.
En el caso nuestro, como ciudad y como región, de los temas que más impactan negativamente en aporte de emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero en contra del cambio climático, justamente lo que nosotros vemos es que el sistema de transporte público es determinante en nuestras ciudades. Entonces, avanzar en movilidad sostenible es una de esas grandes razones y de las acciones que tenemos nosotros justamente para cumplir con lo acordado, para disminuir los gases de efecto invernadero, y ya voy a explicar cuáles son las acciones que estamos desarrollando.
And of course, there's some very negative things that we're having to deal with. For example, greenhouse gases. We're trying to incite change to reduce greenhouse gases. We see this change in relation to public transportation, and it's very important, especially in our cities. That is why we are very focused on sustainable mobility, so that problems like greenhouse gases are no longer a problem. And I'm going to go on and explain how we're doing this.
Al 2019, el año entrante, finalizando año, Ya tendremos que haber renovado el 70% de flota de la flota de buses y busetas altamente contaminantes en la ciudad en un 70%.
Our goal is by the end of 2019 to remove 70% of the buses and shuttles of our fleet that are highly, that contribute highly to pollution in our city.
Cuando yo llego en el 2016 al puesto de alcalde, la ciudad tenía 39 kilómetros de ciclorruta para las bicicletas que habían sido construidos en 15 años, o sea, en 4 periodos de gobierno. Y era necesario hacer un esfuerzo adicional para seguir estimulando la movilidad sostenible a través de la bicicleta, la cual en estos 4 años la construcción será de 80 kilómetros más, o sea, el doble de lo que se había construido en 15 años, para llegar a 120 kilómetros y dejando un plan de expansión ya a varios años.
When I began as the mayor back in 2016, there were only 39 kilometers of bike trails, and that was they were built over the course of 15 years, and that's 4 governments. Since I began, and since I have started focusing on sustainable mobility, especially as it pertains to bicycles, I have added 80 more kilometers. That is double of what had been made in the past 15 years. So now we have 120 kilometers of these bike paths, and we, of course, have an expansion plan as well.
Dentro del sistema de buses, de carril solo bus, que tenemos en la ciudad combinado con el sistema metro, tranvías, metrocables que se mueven con energía eléctrica, o sea, 0 emisiones, pues nos sumaremos al sistema carril solo bus cambiando los buses que funcionan a gas natural vehicular por buses 100% eléctrico que deben de estar rodando ya por la ciudad en agosto del año entrante.
One of our plans that we have for August 2019 has to deal with our bus system. We, of course, have buses in our city. We have everything like, the metro, we have trams, we have other modes of transportation. However, in terms of the buses, we're trying to move completely from natural gas to 100% electric with all our buses in the city.
También la estructuración de los primeros 1.500 taxis eléctricos en la ciudad de Medellín.
This holds true as well for the 1,500 electric taxis that we have in Medellín.
Y algo muy importante para disminuir también la temperatura en diferentes zonas de la ciudad, estamos en la construcción de 30 corredores verdes, que lo que supone es cambios de concreto por árboles, por más verde, para poder disminuir justamente la temperatura en diferentes zonas de la ciudad y aportar también a la calidad del aire. Son 30 corredores verdes que recorren las calles principales de la ciudad, en las cuales es una gran siembra de árboles, de arbustos de diferentes especies, con las cuales a los sitios más congestionados de la ciudad y los que eran los más contaminados ha regresado también la vida, porque han regresado las mariposas, han regresado los insectos, y eso es importante también para la ciudad. Son 30 corredores.
Something that is also very important to us is lowering the temperature in different zones within the city. We are making green corridors throughout the city. We're exchanging concrete for trees. We're making things greener. As I've said, we're making these green corridors. We've already established 30 of them. We've added things like trees and bushes, and what is happening is we're putting these green corridors along really congested, polluted areas of the city along these main streets, and we're bringing life back into it. We're bringing back butterflies, we're bringing back insects.
Aparte de las acciones, que estas son acciones más físicas de gobierno, yo estoy convencido que lo que necesitamos hacer nosotros como líderes locales es generar un cambio cultural en nuestra gente, en nuestra ciudadanía, porque cuando ponemos metas grandes como ciudades de decir vamos a disminuir en tanto porcentaje a tantos años las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, vamos a tener emisiones 0 al 2050, eso hay que aterrizarlo a lo individual, y es cada persona en cada ciudad cómo se compromete con el cambio climático, cómo se compromete a definir acciones en contra del cambio climático, y que cada persona utilice menos vehículo y utilice más bicicleta, más sistemas de transporte público, que cuide los árboles, que cuide su ciudad. La clave de esto es cultura ciudadana. Tiene que haber un cambio cultural a favor del medio ambiente y del planeta.
And it's not just physical things either. We also need to change things for our citizens on a cultural level. Because we have these very big goals, and we say we'd like to reduce X% over X amount of years in terms of greenhouse gases, say, or zero emissions by 2050. But we need to make that important for our citizens so that they understand, so that we can fight climate change. We need to drive less cars. We need to ride our bike more, use the bus more. We need to treat our nature, our trees, everything well. And this is very key on a cultural level.
That's great. Thank you for those comments. A couple things just to pull out there. What I like about this discussion is moving beyond just the commitment to the things that you're doing to actually implement these programs. And so removing the worst vehicles, expanding electric taxis, the bike lanes, the green corridors, it's very exciting. I want to ask you each a final quick question here. For Warsaw, as you think about implementing these programs, what is the role of stakeholders, community groups, the business community, others who you need to bring into this process for the kind of comprehensive solutions that we're talking about?
I should say that first of all, there are different kinds of NGOs, because NGOs, they are powerful in Warsaw. There are many of them. We have also, they participate in our so-called commissions committee, which we have, I think, about altogether 30 this kind of committees, but at least 6 of them is devoted only to the environment, to the change of our habits, as it was mentioned by them, and also change the culture, just to not to push for example, construction of many parkings, because we prefer to construct park and ride when you can live for free your car, and you can take public transport, of course, metro, train, or bus. So for us, this is very important. Of course, we have cooperation also with the business. For example, this car sharing electric cars, which is 200 in Warsaw at the moment. No, it's not fully developed. It was invented, it was launched by the startup which we helped to pay at the beginning, because we organized the startups there's a competition, and we subsidize the startup in the beginning only, not absolutely, not for the all time, or not all time. And this is a business contribution, but also citizens. I already mentioned this morning that for the first time we had the proposal which came from the citizens, just to have a more monitoring the air pollution. Yes. So I think that especially in the capital city, citizens are much more aware, and in a certain way maybe even better educated, that they demand from us that we have to behave this way. And of course, it's sometimes we have to balance, because the drivers, the car drivers, they want to have more. They said that we are only devoted to the people, to public transport. So we have a discussion always when we would like to create a new bus lane. It's always a discussion, because it's only for the taxis, and mainly for buses. Yes, bus lane, as the name shows. And now we allowed just a pilot project for the motorbike. Yes. And this is the way how we try to combine all these all these goals and targets and different groups. Especially youngsters are pushing us.
Well, I know that issue around monitoring air pollution and being able to show, both engage the public and then show the difference that these policy changes are making is super important across multiple cities. And certainly through the C40 network, we see that bubbling up. It's a good segue to the last question. So you're going to get the last word. From your perspective, Mayor Abutaleb, what lessons would you offer to other mayors who are looking to transition to zero emissions transport?
Well, I should say sharing is gaining. We had a wonderful professor in the Netherlands who won the Nobel Prize for economy with a very simple thesis: sharing is multiplying.
Sharing is multiplying. That's good. Sometimes I hear C40 mayors say that they just like to steal.
Yeah. Well,
best
that's
ideas.
the only thing you might steal. We might steal, I should say, because we also steal from the others. Just copy things. There is a Dutch saying that says, under pressure, everything becomes liquid. Under pressure, everything becomes liquid. And that's a very interesting populist voice coming from society. But without the support from the community, such a major change is not possible. I remember when I came in office 9 years ago, the major topic in Rotterdam was safety, public order, policing, law enforcement. And there was a reason for that. And nowadays, I meet every 2 weeks citizens somewhere in one of the neighborhoods. So a couple of months ago, I was visiting the entrance of the port to the North Sea, a small village, belongs to Rotterdam. So I went there and it was on the agenda putting the issue of physical safety, blasts, things that may happen in a refinery or something like that. And at the end of the day of the meeting, I was wrong. That was not the issue the citizens wanted on the agenda. The issue they wanted was air pollution, air quality.
Yeah. So
there was a fundamental change, very pleasant to me, because 9 years ago, this was not a sexy topic. It's changed dramatically. There is really a willingness among citizens to push this issue forward. Air quality, health issues is really important. And for youngsters, a bus is not a sexy thing, but when you put free internet in it, or in the subway, or in the tram, a free Wi-Fi is really a wonderful tool to attract a huge amount of kids in the public transport, going to school, going to sports, and then suddenly the bus becomes a sexy transport instrument. So listening to what your citizens are saying makes things sometimes easier. So 9 years ago, public order, policing was the issue, and now the first chapter, written in the government that I might lead for the coming 4 years, the first chapter contains 3 pages, already translated in English, all about climate change, and a budget of 150 million euros, city money to be spent on this issue. Of course, that will be linked to national budgets and European budgets, but this is scarce local money. I will make a call to C40 if you allow me to do that.
Sure.
Sharing knowledge is very important, but that leads to knowing how to do things. That's not the same as how to finance things. So creating a connection between nice to know to how to finance is a really important thing. A lot of colleagues of mine are wrestling with where can I find money in systems that exist, or maybe systems that I don't know, how to deal with that type of investments. We're talking about huge investments, and not all the cities in the world have the same resources as, for instance, Rotterdam or Berlin or Paris. So that will be, to me, not a call, but a suggestion. Please connect the both elements together. That will be help a lot of mayors in the world. Thank you.
yes, I can confirm it because I'm the mayor for the last 12 years, and it was completely different issues which were interested the citizens, and it has changed dramatically over this time.
Yeah. Great. Well, I thank you so much to our 3 mayors for your time and sharing the ambitious commitments. I think a couple themes. It's clear that air quality is emerging as a serious theme that mayors are having to deal with, along with reducing greenhouse gas emissions, dealing with congestion here. I've heard the concepts and importance of engaging citizens, building that demand, and certainly your closing on finance, I know, is a theme that's come up in a number of the conversations. And so we've heard about...
And internet in public transport.
And internet and public transport to make it sexy, make buses sexy. So we've heard about the ambitious actions that are taking place in these 3 cities, and it really highlights the power and influence in what's possible. But I really also want to recognize all 26 cities that have signed the fossil fuel declaration, including those who are here at the conference and around the world. And collectively, we can have a really significant impact. So with that, thank you very much, mayors. Thank you so much. It was terrific. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mayor Gutierrez. Thank you. Okay. So with that, we're going to transition right into our next conversation. We heard a little bit about stakeholders, and that's a nice way to begin our next discussion. One of the main barriers that mayors face, and really every level of government faces in delivering bold climate action, is a lack of consensus or strong enough action among multiple stakeholders. And so for mayors, it's critical to be able to make the case for climate action, and some of the biggest challenges they really can't overcome alone. So to this point on financing, private sector clearly has a really important role to play. And as an example of this, delivering zero emissions areas while faced with the challenge of limited zero emission freight models. And so C40 is really pleased to be launching a new initiative on freight, working with key partners and experts to help cities send the right signals to the market and advance their zero emission freight objectives. And so I'm going to invite to the stage our next 2 speakers for a quick conversation, Jeff Schlesinger, who's the U.S. President of LeasePlan, and Stephen Cotton, the Secretary General of International Transport Workers Federation, which represents about 670 trade unions across 140 countries and a total of almost 20 million workers. So we have not very much time, but I'd like to give a round of applause to both of you for your commitments on climate change. And we will start with a softball, because you've both flown quite some distance to be here and join this climate summit. You clearly think climate is important. And so why do you think that the commitments by cities to zero emissions are so important for your work? Steve, let's start with you.
So thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a real privilege to be here. Transport workers are a kind of the backbone of cities, and we really support the declaration of the C40 and the mayors to set their own agenda. And part of our reason to be part of that process is recognition that workers should be part of comprehension of the way the world is changing. And we want to be part of the dialogue and the transition to ensure that the working men and women that run cities and keep cities going are part of a process that guarantees we understand our part for climate change, but also that we're able to have the right skills and the right attitude to take that challenge.
One question, just to dig in a little bit on that, is sometimes in cities we see the bold initiatives that have to happen, but they're not necessarily taken with a lens at the front end to how to engage workers, or those of us who are thinking about climate change all the time are not necessarily thinking about at the front end of sort of designing those policies or programs. Is there anywhere where you see that working well, or sort of models for that?
Okay, so we're kind of a social dialogue organisation, so we look for partnerships where we can build opportunities. Part of the challenge is workers don't really like change. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at how do we secure their ability to have a conversation. We're kind of running it parallel to the future of work debate, because those 2 issues are kind of entwined, and a lot of it is about how to find partners. So we have partnerships with employers groups, UITP being one of them, where we have cooperation about climate change generally, and we see certain cities are more progressive. Certainly it depends a little bit on the leadership of the mayors, but we have operations in Europe and other places where we're talking about how do we take the journey together, I think is the best way to put it.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Jeff, turning to you, tell us first about LeasePlan and then this question about why the city's commitments are important.
Well, LeasePlan is the largest fleet management company in the world. We own and manage approximately 1.8 million vehicles globally, and we've made a strong commitment to the climate initiatives, both in this conference as well as being a founding member of EV100. And we're pretty proud of what we're doing to leave the world in a better place than what we found it. Steve brought up a great word, change. Change is really hard for people. As we start seeing the delivery dates on EVs and BEVs, ZEVs come in, I think there's more of an anxiety of the people. What do we do? Within the United States, it's a little different than Europe in that we're further behind than Europe in our infrastructure. And given the sheer size of the United States versus Europe, it's a longer process. I applaud the mayors who have preceded us and are following us on the stage here for their efforts to create a zero policy, climate, carbon. All those words that were not very popular a few years ago are now in the forefront of most discussions.
Can you tell us just a couple words about the state of the sort of technology and where we are on the electrifying the long-haul vehicles?
Oh, I wish I had a crystal ball to know where to invest. Yeah, if you separate them into automobiles and trucks, the automobile is getting more press. The cargo that an auto carries is pretty similar no matter how big it is. It's people. The truck is a much more difficult concept because you can carry anything from feather beds in the back to lead bars. So there's a weight differential in the trucks. LeasePlan is very much focused on the auto. We've made a commitment that all of our corporate vehicles will be zero emissions in 2021, and our entire fleet of 1.8 million vehicles, we're shooting to be completely electric, zero emissions by 2030. Between now and 2021, when we're completely electric, we're looking at an announcement we made this morning with the Land Life company, which they will do the reforestation. So we will be, as a company, zero carbon emissions between now and 2021 when we go completely electric in our own corporate fleet.
That's great. Thank you. I'm gonna turn back to you, Steve, to talk, because you were beginning to say a few words about just the importance of work across multiple kind of actors. So can you just say a few words about the importance of the alliances, not just between cities, which is obviously represented here, but also other levels of government and other kind of actors in the work that you do?
I think when you come to a conference like this and you see the passion that everybody has, it's kind of a conclusion that everybody's accepting the climate situation. But in reality, there's still quite a lot of work to be done to get this up the political agenda. And that, for us, means from the workplace where our workers are represented and the fears about their jobs and the changing kinds of vehicles, or the cities where we're looking at quality of life, health, all of the issues that are impacted by climate change. So for us, it's the partnership is who can we get in a room with, have a conversation about how we can change process. So that could be LeasePlan, although not too many transport workers in automobiles that are automated. But the question is really, who do we work with? So we look at mayors. Obviously, first is get our unions to understand that the transition is happening, and how do we ensure that where we see the size of cities is predicted to grow and grow and grow. So part of the challenge is what's happening to the cities, how does the transportation take place, how does it change, and then bring it up to federal, national, international, and have debates about how do we make sure that people are prepared and confident that there's a space for them in this changing environment. So for us, it's really about building partnerships with everybody and having a conversation and then sharing the message. And I think core to all of that is openness, transparency, and an opportunity to share what we would hope would be best practice, and then share it from one place to other, learn from each other's mistakes.
That's such an important point about building the consensus and building political will. You know, I obviously work for Bloomberg Philanthropies, and Mike Bloomberg has been talking about what he sees as the sort of greatest threats facing humanity. And you think about sort of the optimism here, but then also the challenge that we're up against. When he talks about that, he says, you know, there's three: automation, climate change, and nuclear proliferation. So we're going to, for the purposes of this, set nuclear proliferation aside, but kind of solve the other two in the context of cities. So I guess final question is for you, Jeff, which is just, you know, I'm not sure even a few years ago we would have had you both represented here at a conference on global climate action. And so can you just leave us with a couple words about why this is central to your business strategy?
It's central to our business because we need to think 5 years, 10 years, 20 years out. If we think 6 months out, it's a fairly simple business model. We're the only fleet management company in the world that's taking this sort of a position on going completely ZEV in our corporate fleet in 3 years, completely ZEV in 12 years on 1.8 million vehicles. And we felt it was a bit disingenuous if we were out there talking to our customers about carbon footprints, emissions, net neutrality, without walking the talk. So we went all in. We're putting 20 charging stations at headquarters. We're all going EV. We're doing partnerships. We'll talk later. And we're just trying to change the world one car at a time.
That's great. Well, on that note, let's thank both Steve and Jeff for their comments. And,
thank you.
And I really have to say, thank you so much for your commitment to climate change and everything you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are covering a lot of ground here, which is exciting. We now have a really special announcement from Rebecca Moore, who is the head of Google Earth, Earth Engine, and Outreach at Google. So, Rebecca, I'd like to welcome you to the stage. Round of applause, please. Thank you.
It's going to be a little bit of a change of pace. The question we're going to look at is how can we harness the power of technology, big data, machine learning, geospatial analytics, and put that in service of the cities who are trying to create clean, healthy cities of the future. So we're going to do a whirlwind tour. We're looking here at Las Vegas, which was the fastest growing city over the past 3 decades. It's interesting, you can see while Las Vegas is growing, Lake Mead is shrinking. Another phenomenon that we built using our Earth Engine platform is looking at, this is off the coast of Cape Cod, and you can see the shifting sands of Cape Cod. Cities are having to adapt to these geologic changes that are happening on the planet. This is a city in Peru that you can see is moving away from the river as it is meandering. Using our Google Earth Engine technology, we basically built this 3-decade time lapse of the planet from detailed satellite imagery. So every place on the planet is now published. And you can see these phenomena such as retreating glaciers and irrigation in the desert, deforestation in the Amazon. The key thing about building that global planetary time-lapse is that we had to analyze 5 million satellite images over that 32-year period. It was more than 3 quadrillion pixels, but because we ran it on 66,000 computers in parallel, we could build that new data product in a few days, and on a single computer, it would have taken 300 years. So again, just wanted to give you a sense of the big data that we're able to work with in the Google Cloud. So my team is now putting this technology in service of sustainability projects with partners around the world. For example, monitoring deforestation, mapping global surface water changes over time, tracking fishing activity for sustainability. Let's just dive a little bit into that. We will come to transport. So we're looking here at trawlers in China on the day that 1-month annual moratorium is lifted for fishing. You can see there's a lot of boats. You zoom out, you see a lot more boats. You zoom out, it's a bad day to be a fish when that moratorium opens up. But what's happening globally has not been known. It's been invisible, what's been happening on the high seas, how much fishing is happening and where is it happening. And that challenge is important because 20% of the seafood that we eat is either illegal, unreported, or unregulated. So we worked to build a platform, a project called Global Fishing Watch, and you're seeing here now the first global picture of fishing activity. And once you have that data set, you can ask certain questions of it. For example, what we're looking at here is, what is the effect of a marine protected area that was put in place in Kiribati? You see that square in the center. We're looking at it before and after the marine protections went into effect. So you can do virtual monitoring on this big data from space. And this is very helpful to the countries that do not have the capacity to have big navies, you know. Indonesia has become the first country to really adopt this significantly because seafood is so important to them. And Minister Susi of the Marine and Fisheries is kind of heroic because there's so much invasion of their fishing waters that she has taken to blowing up ships that are illegally fishing in their waters, after giving warning and so on. But yeah, she's quite impressive. And you know, she's making great use of this big data, these analytics, the insights that we're deriving that enables Indonesia to understand what's going on. It can also be used for solutions. So the government of Mexico is using it to plan a new protected area. Fishermen objected to the creation of the area, but once we showed that only that tiny area, less than 4% of the fishing was going to be taken, they were fine with it. So it can help map solutions. Let's talk about air quality. Fred Krupp of EDF came to us in 2013 and said, hey, you guys are driving everywhere with Street View, why not turn your cars into mobile environmental sensors? So we did that. We drove, we set that up, we've driven virtually all the streets of Oakland. This is a map of black carbon. With this data, we showed that within a single street, you can have a 5 times difference in air quality and air pollution. Hyper-local, street-level understanding of air pollution. We gave that data to Kaiser Permanente. They compared it to 6 years of health records, more than 40,000 people in Oakland, and they found a link between that street-level air pollution and heart problems for the elderly. We've now driven more than 100,000 miles in California, collecting more than 250 million air quality measurements, so LA and so on. And again, we're making all this data public, open, and free to the cities, to scientists, to health workers, and so on. And yesterday we announced that we're now adding 50 new Street View cars to this fleet. We're driving cities now all over the world, collecting air quality data. For example, we announced we're doing this with Copenhagen. It's not just ground level air quality data. There's fantastic data now coming from space, and we're bringing that into our platform. And here we're looking at, you can see for California, for example, NO2 in LA from air pollution and the wildfires in Northern California. So the last point here is what we just announced this week now, based on these kinds of projects and learnings that we've gathered. We announced this week with the Global Covenant of Mayors our new environmental insights platform that is turning Google Maps data, this type of data, into actionable insights for the cities for building emissions, transportation emissions, and solar energy potential. We've got 5 pilot cities. Here we're looking at Melbourne, building emissions, transportation emissions, and we actually give you lightweight scenario modeling, so you can look at what if you replace some number of cars with cycling trips, how would that lower your emissions? And then for the solar data, we have very high quality solar potential for every roof in these cities. Here we're modeling every 10 centimeters square over 10 minutes of every day for the entire year, what is the solar potential of those roofs, and then turning that into data. What is the solar potential for your city? The city of San Jose, this is my last slide, actually used this data to have the ambition to become the first gigawatt city, renewable energy city in the world, is my understanding. And this is, we think, the power of this kind of data. So we're very excited to put this in the hands of our first cities. If you're interested in getting data for your city, please let us know, let GCOM know. It's just the start. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
So exciting. I have to say firsthand at Bloomberg, we've been supporters for the last several years of the development of that Global Fishing Watch tool, and it's so cool. And we've seen for the first time our partners on the policy level be able to work with national governments to then enforce against the people who are violating the no fishing areas. So that's been really exciting to turn some of those tools and Rebecca's smarts and her team to providing that kind of data and analytics for cities is super exciting. So it's a nice way to close out our panel. Thank you for your attention and for being here. I hope you're leaving feeling as inspired and energized both about the partners that have emerged and are applying their most creative thinking and hardworking teams to the challenge of climate change, but also, of course, to our mayors and the cities who have signed on to the Green and Healthy Streets Declaration. So with that, I'll close the panel. Thank you so much.